Hi, we're continuing on Shulchan Aruch Orach Chaim, Hilchot Tefillah. We're starting Siman Tzadi Hey today about Kivun Evarav B'Shat Tefillah, the way a person's body should be. What Rambam counts as one of the elements that's needed for Tefillah is Kivun Haguf. So the Tikkun Haguf, Kivun Haguf is really one of the parts that are necessary for Tefillah, and there is an entire Siman in Shulchan Aruch discussing this, starting really from what the Gemara says in Masechet Brachot Daf Yud Amud Bet. The Gemara says a person should stand with feet together because the pasuk says Raglehem Regel Yesharam. By Malachim it says that their feet are straight, and it says Regel Yesharam in singular form, which indicates that it looks like one foot. Both of them together, it looks like one. So that's the lashon of Shulchan Aruch, that you should put your feet together as if they're only 1 foot. To simulate the way the malachim are, the figurative image of the malachim. Dichtiv bahen, in pasuk in Yechazkel writes, "Veraglehem regel yesharam, klomar raglehem nir'in keregel echad." Now, the Tur over here brings this, but he brings also another reason for it, which is in Bet HaMikdash by avodah, the Kohanim would go akev besat agudal, so it was really together, and the nafkamina for this would be whether or not women should do the same way. Later on in Shulchan Aruch we'll see that the concept of simulation of malachim does not really necessarily apply to women, but the other one of the Beit HaMikdash does apply to everyone equally, because it is the replica of what avodah would have been in Beit HaMikdash. Hence the halacha would be, the Torah Chaim writes that even for women they should do the feet together. Now there are certain minhagim, Rav Moshe Feinstein brings this in a tshuva in Orach Chaim, that there are certain communities that they have a minhag that they put together the akev, the heel, but the front of the feet are separate from each other, forming like a V shape, and that is based on the second element that's discussed in the pasuk over there. Raglehem regel yeshara, the kaf regel egel. It's kaf regel egel, like the hoof of a regel of egel, which really the back of it is together, the front of it is separated a little bit. So says Rav Moshe Feinstein, there is such a minhag. I personally remember that many people in Are Paras, in my travels, when I went to different cities, that's how they used to stand. But dafka, by standing heel together and the fingers open from each other, so that's something to be mindful of as well. But in halachic poskim, it's exactly the opposite. That if a person could do, the Mishna Berura says, either you're akef together. Some people cannot stand with feet parallelly equal together like this. So if you could either do this or this, the Mishna Berura would say that having the fingers together would be even more important, halachically speaking, at least as much as possible, as we will see. Now it says the Mishnah Berura, "Ubediavad afilu im lo kiver raglav klal yatsa." B'diavad, if you didn't do it, you'll say. Now Rav Moshe Feinstein writes in a tshuva in Chelek Hey of Orach Chaim, Siman Lamed Ched, I believe it is, that Shaliach Tzibur that doesn't do it because he can't do it, then you let him be Shaliach Tzibur. But if he doesn't do it because he thinks these things are not important, and who cares how you stand, and he doesn't make the attempt, therefore he would be pasul from being Shaliach Tzibur. We don't let him be Shaliach Tzibur, because this is part of Tikkun HaGuf that the Rambam calls, and the Shaliach Tzibur certainly should be doing all of those things as much as possible. So if it's possible for him but he does not attempt to do it, we won't let him even be the Shaliach Tzibur. So it says the Mishnah Berura, lehidamot lemalachim, this that we simulate the figurative image of the malachim, shekevan shemedaber im hashchina tzarich lesalek kol machshavot haguf milibo, because you're speaking in front of Shechina, you should separate everything of the bodily thoughts from you, and to imagine in your mind as if you're an an angel, your malach, standing in front of Hashem to serve Him. Ve'afilu im hu yoshev ba'agala, and says the Mishnah Berura, even if you're sitting, for whatever reason you're traveling, you can't be standing up. We discussed this in the previous Siman. Or other achronim say, even if a person is sick and he's in bed and he has to daven laying down, both of those scenarios, you still mikol makom mechaber raglav, you should still put your feet together the way you would have done it while standing. Od katfu shal yismoch az la'acharav v'lo yehem mutei listadav. If you're davening sitting, then you should not. We discussed this already in previous Siman. You should not be laying back in a comfort zone, because that's not the way you stand in tefillah. So even though that you must sit because of the scenario you're in, L'maseh, you should sit with kavod. You should not stretch your feet or cross your legs, or any of those things that are derech gava. Mipnei shekol zehu derech gava, ela yoshev v'rosho kafuf. You sit, you put your head down with humility and feet together. That's how you're going to be davening. Now, the Or Tzion writes, Chaminzion Abba Shaul's students, that the Shcharuch that says you put your feet together as though they are, it's like 1 foot. You see from here that it's not sufficient to put the heels together and it will be like a V. So the machloket that we mentioned in Minhagim that Rabbi Shofaisim brings, Chacham Ben Zion Rabbi Shaul says that you see from the language of Shulchan not like that. In the language of Shulchan you see it should be mamash like one, not like the other minhag that it's broad. And the Ben Ish Chai also seems to indicate the same exact thing. If you can't really put the fingers of your feet together, then the Ben Ish Chai writes that's better to put the fingers together than the heel, as we mentioned before, and that's the indication of many other poskim as well. Now, if you put your feet together, then you cannot stand with a proper balance. Then a person, of course, does not have to risk his balance and his kavanah in the tefillah. Some people can't really stand properly when the feet are completely together, and they'll have this feeling of imbalance and falling off, falling down. So in that case, of course, a person should be standing rather with a comfort zone, the minimum, of course, of opening between the legs, between the feet. You would try to put them as much as possible together, and then you daven. You don't have to go out of your way to do it in a way that you feel imbalance in the entire duration of the tefillah, and that would be proper. Says the Mishnah Berura. Now, one additional thing that the Ben Ish Chai brings in the simulation that we have to the Malachim is that before you stand to tefillah, before you start your tefillah, people, this minhag that he brings, some of the Eastern countries have this minhag that you see them turn back from right, turn back from left, kind of like trying to, it looks like they're getting permission from other people, considering other people who are there, because that is, right? The malachim, they do the praises of HaKadosh Baruch Hu in unison, and there's a mutual respect between them, the way we say it in Nakdishach. That is something that we simulate also to show ourselves that we become like malachim, that they are mekabel malchut shamayim ze mize. So says the Mishnah Berura in Sif Katan Gimel, and this is a part in Ramah that we didn't read yet. In parentheses, the Ramah writes, "Yesh omrim she'omed leitpalel yelech lefanav shalosh pesiot derech keruv v'hagasha ledavar sh'tzarech la'asot." There are those who say, and this is again the Tur brings this, that you go 3 steps forward when you want to start your tefillah to show that you are excited, you are going forward to do this. You're ready for getting closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu and to start tefillah, to start something you need to do. And the Mishna Berura writes to this, but you don't have to go 3 steps back in order to go front. So you don't have to go back 3 steps and then take 3 steps forward. You could just stand or take 1 big step back and then take 3 steps forward. This is what the Eliyahu Rabbah writes. But Minhag HaOlam, says the Chafetz Chaim, Lelech La'achorav, the minhag is to go 3 steps back and then go 3 steps forward. And this is what the Kaf HaChaim writes as well. The Kaf HaChaim writes that the Ben Ish Chai writes it, Kaf HaChaim writes it, that you must take 3 steps back and then 3 steps forward. And they bring the reason for this to be the 3 milin, the shlosha milin, that the Jews were thrown back, so to speak, in Ma'amad Har Sinai, and then they came back close to Har Sinai to accept the Torah. So even though that this is tefillah, but you're standing in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and we simulate that thing of being thrown back, so to speak, 3 mil, and coming back now afterwards to stand in front of Hashem to get the Torah. Here also in the presence of Hashem, we do the same thing. The Kaf HaChaim, I believe, he adds another reason. He says that this shows hachna'ah of a person, that you take 3 steps back as if you're afraid, then Hashem Sfatay Tiftach, please open my mouth, there's certain level of humility and hachna'ah, subordination, that is as if you symbolize that I'm afraid even to stand in front of you, HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I am Shav Achor, I'm thrown back, and now I come daring, so to speak, to stand and speak in front of you. It's something so beautiful when a person thinks about it in that way. When you step forward to daven in front of the presence of Shekhinah, so that is what the Kaf HaChaim says, and that certainly is the minhag of the Sfaradim, as the Ben Ish Chai and the Kaf HaChaim say. Not just the minhag that the Chafetz Chaim brings was the minhag Ashkenaz, but by us is more of an inyan. They write that a person must do this to step 3 steps back and then 3 steps forward. So says the Mishnah Berura, B'darkei Moshe, it's the Ramah writes in his Darkei Moshe that Maharil היה נוהג לעמוד בשחרית לתפילת 18 מתי שהתחיל השליח ציבור תהילות לאל עליון. Maharil used to stand for preparation of Shemona Esrei already from when the Shliach Tzibur would say Teilot La'el Elyon. Now there's also, you see, when the Shliach Tzibur says Teilot La'el Elyon, everyone stands up, kind of getting ready for standing in Tefillah. And the Ben Ish Chai and Kaf HaChaim writes that it's not hinging on the saying of the Shaliach Tzibur, but really it depends on you yourself saying it. So you don't have to stand when he stands, and if you are ahead of him, you have to stand earlier when you start saying Tehilot La'el. That's the important part that the Ben Ish Chai says, and he says that you immediately stand up by saying the word Tehilot, and you want the end of the word to be said standing already. So you stand by the word Tehilot already, ready for Tefillah. And in Mincha, Kasherat Shelach Tzibur Lifnei Teva, by the time that the Shelach Tzibur would go down to the Teva, Maharil would already stand up, preparing himself for the Tefillah. And by Arvit, Kashetchila Shaliach Tzibur Kaddish, they will stand by the beginning of Kaddish. If you have to blow your nose, if you have to spit, whatever it is, you get yourself ready. All these are parts of hachanat guf, of making yourself ready, that when you stand, you're not disturbed by anything. If you need to cough. If you need to blow your nose, if you need to fix your clothing, like the Gemara says in Rav Yehuda would be beautifying himself with his clothing before he stood to tefillah. All of these are considered part and parcel of tikkun haguf, that the person should be prepared for the tefillah. Now, Says the Shulchan Aruch, Seif Bet. צריך שיחוף ראשו מעט, שיהיו עיניו למטה לארץ, ויחשוב כאילו עומד בבית המקדש, ובליבו יכוון למעלה לשמיים. So there are three things that happen here. Physically speaking, you put your head down a little bit, כופף ראשו, that your eyes are towards the ground, but then your thoughts are למעלה, of course, your thoughts are to shamayim, even though that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is found b'no kol ha'aretz kevodo, and it's not just up there, but the thoughts are to the Shemeh Shamayim, because again, the way the ascending of the Olamot work, we generally speaking assume that there is the Olam down here, and then there are the Olamot above. So therefore, your heart should be, says the Shulchan Aruch, to Lemala L'Shamayim, and you think your thoughts should be that I'm standing in Bet HaMikdash in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, serving as a Kohen, but Unshalma Parim Sefatenu. I'm doing a service with my heart and with my mouth. Unfortunately, we don't have the Bet HaMikdash, and that's how it's going to work. So it says the Mishnah Berura, Shiyu Enav Lemata La'ares Ayin Le'el Siman Tzadi. We already discussed this a little bit in Mishnah Berura over there in Siman Tzadi, and the Bach writes that before you start to daven, you look out the window. We spoke about this also, why a person should choose to daven in a Bet Knesset that has windows, especially windows to the east. And the poskim write, the Mishnah Berura and the other achronim, that would be actually a halachic reason to choose a shul versus another shul. If you have a shul with windows towards Mizrach, and you have a shul without windows towards the Mizrach that you can see the Shemayim, when you stand in Tefillah, you must choose the one that has windows towards Yerushalayim, towards the east, when you stand to Tefillah. And part of that is, right before you start the Tefillah, you look out the window to Shemayim to get that Hachna'ah, to get that Yirat Shemayim, that we spoke about also earlier on, the very beginning of Shulchan Aruch, if you remember, in the name of Arya Kadosh, that you imagine also the name of Yud Kei Vav Kei written be'esh choral be'esh levana in Shemayim, and that is supposed to be a segula for Yirat Shemayim as well, even outside of the time of Tefillah, just regular times during the day as well. But again, especially right before a person starts Tefillah, that's something important to be imposing Yirat Shemayim and Hachna'ah to a person's heart. So it says the Mishnah Berura, Lemata la'aretz v'otam ha'magbihim rasheim ve'enehem lemala k'mabitim al hagag. Those people who during the davening they're counting the ceiling tiles and they're looking up and around. Hamalachim maligim alehem. The malachim mock them. This is in Sefer Hasidim. Rabbi Yehuda Hasid writes this in Sefer Hasidim in Siman Yudchet. And the Pri Mekadim writes, you shouldn't do weird and strange, unusual body movements. When you're yachid in your home, you do what you do. It's not necessarily as important as when a person is in sibur. You have to be within a certain norm. The Gemara says about Rabbi Akiva that when he had to daven alone, he would be bowing down and flat on the floor, and he would put him starting at Shemona Esrei in one corner. You would find him in a different corner at the end of the Shemona Esrei, and long tefillah. But when he was with the tzibur, for kavod of the tzibur, he would daven like anyone else, normal length of tefillah, standing straight, and so on. So that's something that a person should be mindful of as well. Especially not to daven with a loud noise that disturbs other people. We're going to later on discuss that this actually, Kabbalistically speaking, is something very important. The kolalo yishamea, that the voice of tefillah should not be heard to anybody else. Katvo acharonim. Shekol mi she'eno otzem eina b'shat tefillah tebulat Shemona Esrei. This is again the Mishnah Berura that we have mentioned many times. Here is where it is in the beginning of Siman Tzadi Seif Bet, that he brings from the Achronim, that someone that does not close their eyes in duration of Tefilat Shemona Esrei eino zoche lirot pnei Shechina betzet nafsho. That when he passes away, he will not be zochet to see the Shekhinah. This is something, extremely important. But if he needs to daven from the Sidur, and his eyes are in the Sidur, trying to follow the Tefillah, then let lamba. Then that's not as important. Now the Maran Chida alav Shalom homiletically explains this concept of the eyes, the head being down. That when a person is davening on Iske Olam Hazeh, that your eyes are down in looking at Olam Hazeh, so to speak. So you're davening for your needs, physical needs, the needs of Gashmiut, for refuah, for parnasah, for life, and so on and so forth. Your kavanah should be up to Shamayim, right? Your eyes are down. So your purpose of tefillah is for gashmiut, but your heart is up there. That really you're davening for the tachlit of ruchniut, for a purpose that's really, I need the money for avodat Hashem, for tuition for the kids, to be tamidei hachamim, to be bnei Torah, not to get a Rolls Royce and to brag and to have a house that's like this and like that, and to wear clothing that's like this and like that. But nevertheless, you're asking for gashmiut with a kavanah that is ruchani, the shamayim, and this the Shulchan Aruch says, the Mishna says, a person that closes his eyes is the right conduct, and if you have your eyes open, then you won't chas v'shalom be zochet to see the Shekhinah. If a person needs to open his eyes, that's of course different, right? If you need to see something because someone is trying to get your attention, or an emergency happens, or whatnot, then says the Ben Ish Chai, you should stop davening. Don't continue the tefillah. Stop, keep quiet, open your eyes, see what you need to see, and do what you need to do. And then you close your eyes again, and you go back to the tefillah. And when a person is davening within the sidur, mitoch ha-sidur, then the Ben Ish Chai also says that you should not look outside the sidur anywhere, just whatever it's needed for the tefillah. And of course, when you come to bow down, then you don't need the sidur, so you close your eyes then, and you'll go on with the tefillah. Be'ezrat Hashem, we will continue the rest of this ifim in the days to come. Chazak u'Berura.